Um, yeah, I had to stop for a minute. My phone battery was going dry. Plug in. So where was I? Yes, in the Himalayas, and seeing India, just amazing things always happening, and so one of the things, I shared that just like that it could have, I could have become really fried that they were kicking the women out, and I could have become angry or upset. But I actually saw that, very often when things are happening that could be really a disadvantage, they can be turned into an advantage. And, so you can make the best use of what sometimes is an unfair situation. I would have never had that experience, and I'm really glad I did. So despite the fact that it was not good or right for Guru Kripa to do what he did, in the end, it became a nice thing for me. So anyway, meanwhile, the zonal acharya and the guru problems, they were really on the rise and growing worldwide, in the early 80s, 80, 81, started to get very troubling reports of misbehavior by some gurus surfacing. Again, you have to remember of what it was like in those days. There's no internet, so things moved so much slower, information moved so slowly. Like administrative or managerial procedures that, might be done in a few days might take, a year. In those days, nowadays things, they just go a lot faster because of the communication systems, But, because we'd hear bits and pieces over here over time. But when I was in France, someone had come from England and brought a recording of Jai Tirtha singing in ecstasy. And he was really kind of, wailing and expressing ecstasy. And now he was loved and he was respected by many. And, so the first thing was to think, well, maybe he is experiencing something really extraordinary. Who knows? Ecstasy exists. Maybe somebody's, the tape, I heard it, and I thought, ooh, I didn't sound good to me, but. And then eventually it came out that he was taking LSD. And this was just absolutely so shocking. Like it's one thing if somebody's not managing well or, a bit arrogant or doing this or that, but taking drugs, that was just so shocking. And then, so it was imagine the GBC having to deal with these kind of things. Apparently there was some meeting of GBC in Los Angeles, I believe, and they forced him to take sannyas. I have to just say that, at least from my little perspective, that was just a huge mistake. Just a very poor move to solve an issue. I don't know, maybe too many sannyasis, too many men that are not aware of how helpful a good wife is. And his wife is Manjuali, she's like a saint, you know. She's just a beautiful, kind, caring devotee. And she was his greatest asset. She was not an impediment. And they had a young child. And how did they think that would solve this problem without understanding what the real problem is? The solution is ludicrous. Anyway, from my perspective. And it did, you know, it drove him further off the deep end rather than help. And I have seen that many times I've seen that, you know, management of GBCs in trying to solve a situation just actually make it worse. And I'm not criticizing, you know, because it's a very, very difficult job to run an institution, especially, you know, I mean, none of them are trained for this. Not expecting these kind of problems, you know, it's a terrible situation, you know, for his wife and young son. And what to speak of for the British devotees who were very, very, I mean, the majority of them very, very fond of him. And there was also a word about Hansadutta, that there were serious deviations. He was in possession of illegal weapons and other things. And, you know, so there were things that were coming out that just, you know, we never dreamed that we'd have to face these kind of things. And I recall, now I don't know, 82 or 83, not sure, but I had gone to Mayapur for Gaur-Purnima festival. And I was going up the stairs of the Long Building, and I saw a whole line of the ladies from the British Yatra, who I'm very fond of, who I know, you know, I used to pass through there quite a lot, and, you know, friends. And I was so happy to see them. Hey, how are you? You know, and nobody responded. I had no idea what was going on. I mean, they just looked like white and intense anxiety, and they're like, you know, like nobody could even say anything to me. And I was like, what's happening, you know? And they were on their way to speak to the GBC, had called them, and apparently Jayatirtha had, you know, he had been taking shelter of Sridhar Maharaj, Srila Prabhupada's godbrother, and he was continuing with, you know, bizarre behavior. And so the GBC had given him an ultimatum, and they'd said, you know, you absolutely stop your relationship with Sridhar Maharaj, and you stop, you know, doing ABCD. And so rather than comply, he just left ISKCON. And that's what was happening as I arrived. He was just walking right off the property, along with some disciples, and they went to Siddharth Math. And so this was just hugely shocking, and caused tremendous upheaval in especially his places, England, South Africa, and so much confusion for the disciples. Should they stay? Should they go with him? You know, trying to understand what's actually going on. It was just a terrible turmoil. And that just was going to be an ongoing thing. And of course, then there were other reports of other gurus, of sannyasis that were misbehaving. And, you know, well, one thing that we understood is that Krishna consciousness is not so easy and simple as we had thought. I mean, you know, it's not surprising, really, that these difficulties arose. I mean, Srila Prabhupada had told us that after the departure of a great soul, Chaos often ensues. But when you think about these men who were acting as gurus, were young men, many of them less than 30 or early 30s, and hadn't even been practicing for 7 or 8 years. I mean, nowadays, somebody that's been in the movement for 7, 8 years is like a new devotee, doesn't even give classes yet, often. And, and they had, embraced an entirely new culture, and there were no elders. And then this weight of holding absolute authority, clearly, was going to go to their head, and things were getting ugly and bizarre and very unsettling. And it was really, a mix of a mess. It wasn't like there was one thing going on. There were many things going on. And, on one side you have devotees who, they have respect and love for their authority or their guru, and something bad has happened to them, and they're trying to deal with the disappointment and the shock of being let down by them, the incredible grief. And then on the other side you have very angry and fed up and resentful devotees who just want to tear all this guru stuff down and bring down these gurus, and they're really angry and upset. And then there's yet another group of people that maybe there hasn't been a problem with their own guru yet, and they just think that, well, it's too bad that that happened with them, but that's not my guru, or my authority is an exception. And then, this group was sometimes, promoting, very falsely, inflated concepts of their guru. Like, somebody said so-and-so is an incarnation of Rupa Goswami, or, a common theme was that whatever my guru's doing, it's all Leela, even if it looks like Maya. It's Leela. I mean, really, very, very disturbing. And widely varying views and attitudes and moods, And then, of course, there's this growing promotion of Ritvik idea that it was all just a big mistake. Srila Prabhupada never meant to make any gurus, and just forget the whole thing, So here's the GBC desperately. They're all, we're all young people, and we're all doing our best, with not enough experience or realization. And GBC is desperately trying to hold things together, and they wrote some kind of a response paper, how is it these people are falling, that even an Uttama can have difficulties or fall downs. So, just basically, it was a mess of confusion. And yet, for me, meanwhile, back in France, expansion's going on, full steam ahead. Devotees are enlivened. Most devotees are happy with how things are going. However, a shocking thing happened, right? I think that was in '82, is there was a terrible car crash with a group of devotees in a van. And Mahima Bhusana, who was the wife of Adi Shekhar, who was the head of the Sankirtan, the head leader in France, it was his wife, who was really dear to everybody. She died in that crash just immediately. And even to make it worse, she was pregnant, and she had been having haunting dreams that the baby would not live. which turned out to be true. And, you know, it was very, very heart-wrenching. You know, I share all these are just personal stories. It's not like this is like super important histories of ISKCON or something, but, you know, that what we were going through just as people, you know, and how we were dealing with things as they happened, you know, how did we get through all of this? What were we thinking? And, you know, for this it was heart-wrenching that, and Adi Shankar had 3 young children, left orphans. And I remember being asked to go to prepare her body for cremation, and it was just horrifying to me, just the idea. I mean, we talk about death all the time. It's just like birth, old age, disease, and death. But then, you know, young people, when it happens, when you have to see it, and you have to participate in it, it's another, you know, it's another thing, you know, to deal with it. And I was relieved that I was told, well, actually, you can't do that because you're a Pujari, you're going to be going, you have to go on the altar tomorrow, so, you know, it should be somebody else. But it's just to show, and this had an effect on the whole Sankirtan in France, actually, because he was a strong leader. And so, you know, what goes on with a leader, it impacts on who's ever his followers, you know. So this was a rather shocking thing that happened there. But in any case, things continued in France to really expand in what appeared to be wonderful ways. There was a restaurant opened, kind of restaurant preaching center, called L'Arbre Soué. I believe that means a desire tree, Arbre Soué. And that was in the center of Paris, just in a fabulous location and a fabulous restaurant. It was just beautifully designed. Conti and Janardadi are friends of mine that were just very talented couple who had a restaurant in the south of France, or did they do that after? Not sure, but anyway, they were very talented. And they developed that there was like a fine dining restaurant in the bottom that they'd made it sort of like a cave that was beautiful. And then a whole second floor where it was sort of like an art gallery and place that you could use for programs. And then the bottom was this kind of swank-looking buffet-style facility with fantastic prasadam. And so I was there for a little bit to try to help them with opening the restaurant. And I guess it was because they were going to, for the first time, there were a number of gurus that were visiting. I don't know why, I don't remember, but Bhavananda, Rameshwara, maybe some others. And so they were going to, for the first time, invite them to come to the L'Arbre Soué. It was just ready for opening, and Bhagavan was very proud of it. And you know, we see how Krishna likes to humble his devotees. So what happened when we were serving, it's the first time we used all the facilities there. So it was the first time we were using the microwave. And we put one of the main preparations, in the microwave in the wrong kind of a container. And we realized that we'd served it out and that the plastic had melted into the preparation, which was just horrifying. We had to run out and in great embarrassment and tell them not to eat it, you know. So, like, for me, I was very fond of Bhagavan, and yet I started to see the growing weirdness of this guru situation. That, you know, the special meals and the opulence and the kind of like competitive spirit there. You know, I mean, he was clearly kind of showing off, And it didn't feel right. It didn't, you know, more and more things started to not feel right. But at the same time, there was so much success and there were so many good things going on that, you know, I was thinking, well, if it was me, you know, all of this stuff would surely have go to my head, you know, so much success. And, you know, in general, devotee culture was maybe generally getting a little fancier. Now that we're well connected with India, started looking a little more spiffy. I remember the fashion was, you know, the men would wear these silk matka kurtas with this like fancy embroidery down the front. Satyanarayan was a specialist in that. And the ladies were, you know, wearing beautiful silk saris. And so we were in this, moving on from the ragamuffin ashram look, we were getting a little bit more slick looking. Anyway, then apart from that, we also got we got the Chateau de Hermenonville for Radha Paraseshwara. And this was another just incredible place. It was a historical landmark. Apparently, I don't know, was it Jean-Jacques Rousseau's place or it was his place in the park, but it was, he was a famous 18th century philosopher, writer, political writer, very influential person. But anyway, we had a long rental, you know, with an idea to buy this place, and it was just a dream come true, like Pujari's dream, really. You know, if you want to put your deities somewhere that you can imagine, the most beautiful, beautiful place, and 20 minutes from the airport, just maybe 40 minutes from Paris. Magnificent building surrounded by a moat, and a park, and this lake going down. I mean, and of course it would take time and money to fix it and to, you know, before the deities would be moved in. But Bhagavan was determined that we would design everything perfectly for the seva. You know, the deity kitchen and where we were going to keep the deity's clothing and everything was designed especially for the care for the deities. So it was incredible. And you know, with all these huge projects opening, obviously huge money was required. And so the focus shifted from, instead of book distribution, collecting money. Now that was a big change in our movement as things went in this direction. And you know, it wasn't like some diabolical plan to go away from book distribution, but it was just that we were expanding and cost. And you know, it was a huge burden on devotees, but there was enthusiasm and an understanding that it cost to do all these things. We wanted to do these things, and so, you know, there was this emphasis on how different ways of collecting money. And so I received a new service, and Bhagavan asked me to travel in India with a devotee, Kishori, who was a very talented, amazing cook, good at so many things, and very good at making money, but not very good at keeping track of funds and managing things. So he wanted me to travel with her, and she had some ideas about what we could buy in India and how we could, you know, get big sales from these things. So, and that, you know, we could make a good profit there, you know. So she was experienced in India. She was Saurabh's wife, who was the designer of the Vrindavan temple, and Mumbai also. And so off I went to meet her in India. She was already there. And I went to Himachal Pradesh to Kulu Manali area. Very grueling journey on, I don't know, 7, 8, 10 hours on the bus, you know, from Chandigarh to a beautiful place high in the Himalayas called the Valley of the Gods. You know, now it's become, you know, very famous. It's a tourist place, and a lot of Israelis live there. But there are many sacred places there, and it hadn't turned like totally commercial yet when we went there. So it's just interesting to see that it doesn't matter where you go in India, everywhere there are pastime places. And this area is considered by the people there as the cradle of civilization. It's named after Manu, the progenitor of mankind, who lived there. And there's a temple dedicated to him, Manu, Manali, you know, in the Valley of the Gods. And there were places that are associated with the Pandavas. There's a place where Bhima, well, we know that Bhima killed Hidimba, demon Hidimba, and then he married his sister, Hidimbi, I guess she is. And they have a temple to her there. And there's a place where Arjuna performed austerities in some cave there to get where he did austerities to get the Pashupati weapon from Indra. And I think it was Arjuna Kupa or something, the cave where Arjuna was. And it's said to be a home of the Sapta Rishis. And there's a whole bunch of stories about Vashishta Muni there also. And there is a hot springs that we went to, very famous and really nice. The hot springs of Vashishta, you know. So, you know, I mean, we were busy, but we did take it, you know, we did quickly try to see some of these places. And we took a day trek to Rohtang Pass, where there was still snowy Himalayan mountains, and where they say is a portal where demigods enter into our realm, and that the residents of that area are descendants of the Devas. So maybe that's why they call it the Valley of the Gods. And at the Rohtang Pass, we found the place where it's said that Vyasadeva performed austerity there during the time of the Mahabharata War and wrote some of the Bhagavatam. So I remember I had a Bhagavatam. I specifically brought a Bhagavatam. I trekked through the snow to the tiny little shrine to him, and I showed him the Srimad Bhagavatam I brought with me. And I said, here it is. Can you believe it? Look, I'm a Malecha. I have your book. Look at this miracle. What happened, you know? It is true. It's incredible, unbelievable. He's sitting there in the Himalayas. This was written. And now here I am, some, you know, little white Western girl, you know, holding a Bhagavatam. It was amazing. But anyway, we weren't there to enjoy the place. We had a lot of things to buy, and we spent many grueling hours finding beautiful woven items in remote places, mostly chadars and caps. And then from there, we moved on to Kashmir, where we found, you know, also these like beautiful embroidered stoles and jackets and pashmina shawls. Like we actually saw like the real stuff. There's even something that's better than a pashmina. I can't remember. It takes like years to make it. It's unbelievable stuff. People that sit there for like years working on one item. It's just amazing, exquisite items, you know. Anyway, and some of them, like, you know, super costly, like unbelievable. But Kishore had this talent for finding unique things and for getting remarkable bargains also, you know. So, we were there in Kashmir, beautiful place. We had to stop and have a boat ride on the famous, beautiful Dal Lake, which is full of lotus flowers, very beautiful, famous place. And we managed to create quite a stir because we decided to jump off the boat and take a swim, which, people didn't really do. And then Kishori couldn't get back in the boat. She's a little bit large-bodied. And she was like kind of hysterical. And then we had to kind of drag her in on the boat, and everybody on the shore was watching. And it was like, oh boy, these people marveling at these crazy white women, But anyway, so we did all this shopping, and then by some miracle, Kishori, I believe it was with the help of Satyarupa, who was a famous model, became a devotee, wonderful devotee, and she had secured an appointment for Kishori to meet with a top person in Christian Dior. So, we rushed back, and we arrived the night before the appointment. And, we don't really know anything about these things, fashion industry. And, some people try for decades to get into that place, and they prepare these like slick brochures and, showing high fashion items and, well, not us. We had no idea. We hadn't even hardly thought about it. We were 100% unprepared. So in the morning, we're like, oh my God, what are we going to wear? We can't possibly play their game. There's no way we could look good to them. So we have to be something that's out of the box, So Kishori decided she's just going to go as like, she's half Indian, Kashmiri, Brahmin, and she wore a really beautiful silk sari and put on all the bangles and the bindi and everything. And so, what to do with me? She said, well, you just have to be like my eccentric American artist, and, you can wear a Punjabi and put a little makeup on. So we rushed off, and late as always with Kishori, it's always late, and we're dragging these two big, tattered, worn suitcases that had been dragged all over India, survived the bus trips, and, and we arrive at this place, and we ring the bell, and the man who answered, he simply stared at us like we were from another planet. He didn't know what to say. We said, no, we have an appointment. And he buzzed to find out that we did indeed have an appointment with the top people there. And so in we went, and we really caused a stir, dragging the cases down their immaculate hallway, and people were coming to their doors and staring out, at this weird scene. What were we doing there? This sacred fashion site. And it was funny to see they all wore like these little crisp white coats, sort of like doctor coats, and I don't know, clearly a very organized place. And we did not belong. And it only dawned on us then, what a rather embarrassing situation we were in, and that we didn't have a clue what we were doing. And, we felt like both of us, we were looking at each other like we just burst into fits of laughter and run out, But anyway, we controlled ourselves. And, fortunately, we walked into this huge modern office. And the lady there was extremely nice woman, and probably just our age, maybe a little older, and she was super welcoming and very interested to talk to us. And she said, look, I have to be honest, I said I'd do this appointment, just as a favor, but there's no way that we are going to order anything from India. She said, look, I love India. I love the things from India. I used to, she traveled, she did some trekking in India when she was young, she said. And she said, but the place is crazy, you can't work with those people. And so, Kishori, she just like started working her magic. And she said, oh, I know what you mean, but I'm a Kashmiri Brahmin, and I've been doing this since I was little, and I know how to deal with everything, I know how to make it happen, So she was like, oh, all right, let's have some fun. Let's see what you have, and she had some big tables there, and she said, put your cases out, and she started calling on intercom, She said, oh, I'll call some people, we'll have some fun, So all these people started coming in, and we opened the cases, and we're pouring everything out on the tables, and it was just, turned into like a kind of party, I mean, these people there, they do love beautiful things, so, they were having fun. It was certainly a change of pace from their normal day, if nothing else. So, and because we don't see them like most people see them, oh, these like big people in Christian Dior, and, we don't care, it doesn't mean anything to us. So that made them very relaxed. There's just no awe and reverence going on. And so, we're just having a good time. And then suddenly the door opens and a very small, wiry, elderly man walked in. And everything went silent and everyone was kind of stiff and, not moving. It was sort of like if, some big guru walked into a room or something like that. And it was like, what have we got here? And everyone's just kind of looking at each other like, oh, don't know what to say. And I had no idea who he was. So I was sort of, tossing some things over to him to have a look at. And then the lady's like looking at me like, don't, and then I was like, oh, okay, whatever. And then I see that he's just himself. He's looking at everything. And he's like picking out, a few pieces. And you could see that he had like this like X-ray eye, that really had, he picked out the most beautiful pieces. And then he just tossed them over to the lady that we were with. I forget her name. Really nice lady. And he said, put them in the show. And then he just walked out, and it was like everyone just like collapsed, and they went, oh my God, what are we gonna do? What are you gonna do? You are the fashion. You will be in the next fashion show. This stuff is gonna be in there. We've got to figure out how to put it in there. And oh my God, and you're gonna have to supply all what we want as fast as we want it, so you better get your butts back to India, So, very interesting, very, like, you'd have to be in the fashion industry to realize how extraordinary that was, that we who know nothing, suddenly are gonna be the fashion, And anyway, we spent a little time more chatting with the lady, and she was wanting to know, they're talking, oh, you have a daughter this age. Oh, me too. She's the same age. Where does she go to school? And then Kishori, she starts playing the game that she plays well. And she said, oh, I'm not going to tell you where she goes to school because you're just going to criticize. I'm not saying, So then the lady's, obviously she's so curious. No, I won't criticize. I won't, I really want to know, where does your daughter go to school, She showed her a picture of her daughter, and she's just like so cute, and Bhakti Kishori, I think. And so she's like, no, I get a lot of criticism, but it's my culture, and I'm a Kashmiri Brahmana, and I don't care. This is what I want for my daughter. So then the ladies is like dying to know, and then she's like, oh my gosh, she said, is she at a Hare Krishna school? And Kishore, I told you you'd be upset. I don't want to talk about it. She says, no. I think it's very interesting. Please let me see the picture of her, and where is her school? So in the end, it ended beautifully, you know. Kishore is very clever how she talks to people, and, you know, we just made a lovely relationship with her. And then after taking the order, we left, and then Kishore said, well, we're here. This is the fashion street, you know, there's so many, the fashion houses are here. If we've got an order from Christian Dior, that means other people are going to want it too, so why don't we go somewhere else? And I was like, I guess, yeah, okay. So we saw there was a place of Louis Theroux, who was also very famous fashion house. And so we went there, and we had a very similar experience. And we wound up with Louis Theroux himself, and he just loved Kishore. And we wound up, you know, lounging on his like carpet, which was like 4 inches pile, in this like slick office, and just talking about Krishna, just straight out, you know, telling him everything. And so it was a very interesting day, I will say that. And then, so we did have to get back to India to supply, which we did, but I had to get back to my deity work. And we did, Kishore did manage to, you know, supply what they had ordered. And, but we saw very quickly that, you know, it was a lot of work, and it wasn't the kind of profit that we would want, you know. So from Kashmir, we had brought Kashmiri carpets, and that was super lucrative and, you know, easy to sell. And that became something that was a big selling item in Europe during those years. It became very, very big, and we just forgot about fashion. But Kishore told me later that Louis Theroux called her personally one day, and he invited her. He said, I have an invitation, a front row seat for you for this big fashion show. And, you know, she didn't want to go. You know, what do we care about the fashion show? And, you know, imagine, it probably cost a fortune, and there were thousands of people would die to have that, you know. So she was reluctant, but he was like, no, I've done something special for you. It's just for you. I did something really special. And, you know, so she thought, well, you know, I should go. So she went. So she's sitting there in this amazing, imagine that experience, very different environment for her to be in. And so she looked at the pamphlet, you know, they have the brochure of what's going to be, you know, the different parts of the fashion show, and she saw that one was called Krishna. And so she thought, well, that's the surprise. And she thought, well, that's great. That's really nice. All these people will, at least they'll see, okay, this is Krishna. But she had to sit through it, you know, so then when it came, she wasn't expecting it, but when it came to Krishna section, suddenly the lights all went down, and she heard the song playing from one of our records, Samsara Dava Nalalita Loka Janaya Karunya Ganaganatvam. And the models started walking out slowly, and they were in like peach color, like saffron colored outfits. And they were walking down slowly like this. And then when they get to the end of the catwalk, then they had flowers in their hand, and then they would throw their flowers. Is that amazing? So Kishore was really happy about that, you know. Amazing things happen. I just thought that was it was a unique story that needed telling. So, as Bhagavan Zone continues to grow, and also my services were also growing and becoming more diverse, doing so many different things. And at one point, I became the acting zonal deity minister for some time. So, what is a zonal deity minister? I want to explain a little bit of the interesting zonal managerial setup at that time. Because, I don't know, management and how we do it, it's always changing, and on into the future, probably there's a lot of things that we need to know of in the past, what works, what doesn't work, how to adjust, what to develop. Anyway, there were many that were, highly critical of how things were run by Bhagavan. But, I'm only sharing my life experience. And in my sphere of seva, things were working very well. There was a system. There were zonal secretaries who were appointed, for each country. And they were all working under the GBC Guru Bhagavan. And so those zonal secretaries were wonderful devotees who had quite good and cooperative relationships with each other. Sri Ramaswamy, this was obviously after Jayatirtha's, was there in England. Vishwambar Maharaj was in France, and Sundarupa, I'm not sure if he was Maharaj yet, but he was in Italy. Keshava Bharati was in Spain, and not sure about Belgium, but they had set up what they called a horizontal and vertical system. The vertical system being that we know of, that there's a GBC and then there's a TP and temple president and then temple commander, and there's heads of departments, But it was recognized that there's some weaknesses to that structure, that devotees who are heading up various services didn't necessarily have the association of others who were doing the same service. And it was thought that they would be benefited by having opportunities to share and have some camaraderie with others who were doing the same service in other temples or countries in the zone. So, and it was noted that if a department head doesn't work well or is in some way stifled or something by the authority above them, then they just don't really have any way to change or improve the situation. So they added this, what they referred to as the horizontal system, whereby each of the department heads from each temple or country would meet regularly so as to address the issues that come up in their service, in their particular service. And that way people doing the same services, they could meet each other and they could create standards for their departments that could be applied across the zone. And the results of their meetings would be brought before the zonal secretaries so that they also became aware of what was going on in each department. And it gave the department heads an opportunity to voice their concerns to zonal secretaries so that, issues that maybe couldn't be addressed locally could be addressed to a higher body. And that totally made sense to me, and it seemed effective for the time it was applied. And the only downside that I saw of it was that it was expensive for everybody to travel and come together, but it seemed worth the money. Now, as a deity minister, I found that it was very enlivening to meet all the other pujaris and to share what was going on, and it felt healthy to me. And the results of those meetings, we could go and talk to the zonal secretaries about them, and and everyone could keep track of what was happening in various departments. So you didn't feel like you had no voice or no way to address issues that you have. So the deity worship in general in the zone was running well, I would say, and there was a healthy emphasis and cooperation to have high standards. And interestingly, there were kind of like two lines of authority regarding deity worship. In early days, Shilavati was in Los Angeles. She was trained by Srila Prabhupada, and everyone went to LA to get training how to be pujaris. Now, Maita Healy, she had got that training, and she had come to Detroit, and she trained Narottam and I and others with the same standard, and then we went to Paris, and then we began that standard there. But there was also in Europe, Yamuna had been trained by Srila Prabhupada, and Jyotirmayi, Mondakini, and others had been trained from Jamuna, and they had, and what we saw was that Prabhupada had trained them a little differently. Nothing, major, but it was just interesting that it wasn't really conflicting, or there wasn't anything bad going on, but it just made us aware that there are different ways of doing things that can both be right, And, so one of the issues that came up while I was, doing that service was whether to increase the standards of worship. The Archana Paddhati had been translated a few years before. Srila Prabhupada had approved its use. And, up to that point, mostly what our standards were pretty simple, pretty basic. And there were many pujaris, particularly who they wanted to introduce this more, elaborate systems using mudras and mantras and pujas and yagyas and things. It was appealing to many devotees, and so they desired to institute some of these things. And I was a little reluctant, knowing how things change with devotees, and knowing that it's not always easy to keep up standards once you change them. And I felt that it was a little bit of a fad, somebody wanting to be like a Paka Brahmana thing, and so I was a little reluctant, And so, I asked, okay, who amongst all of you is going to commit to upholding these standards for, the next 20 years at least, And, of course they all said they would, I don't think very many of them continued, but anyway, I was outvoted, and we did change some of the things and institute a little bit more of what was there in the Archana Paddhati. But my concern, which I still have, is that when it came to deity worship, Srila Prabhupada was very conservative, and he made it very clear. It was almost like a mantra that we were taught. What were the most important things? Cleanliness, punctuality, first-class boga, flower decorations. I think I've mentioned that before. And I saw that some of these things were not really being carried out to the highest degree. So I guess what the real concern is that the primary things might become secondary, and the secondary things, the add-ons, they would become like more primary. And I think those were kind of justified concerns, as I see now that many places, a lot of the standards are not quite as high, and definitely I have seen at least some places where the cleanliness standards and the standards of the boga have definitely, and flowers, definitely gone down. Of course, there are also many exceptions to that to that where things are going very, very well. But anyway, I didn't win that argument, and I speak about it because it was one of the things that was very, very important to Srila Prabhupada. It was a fear that he had, that would we be able to maintain proper standards? And that it's such a huge, serious, heavy responsibility for the devotees to maintain, you know, for hundreds of years. And, you know, we have that responsibility, and it's a big one. And, you know, it's just interesting that Srila Prabhupada put a lot of that responsibility on many women, you know, because it seems a natural thing for women to care about all these things, sometimes more, cleanliness and decoration and beautiful preparations, you know. So, and that's another concern, but that'll come up later, but that, you know, women are not as much in the picture in many places, which I don't think is a good thing. But also, apart from, you know, doing these, this is just, it's not something that took a huge amount of time doing that service. But between my trips to India and other services, I was often sent to different places for different services, you know, often for a variety of things, but sometimes for Sankirtan, you know. So sometime in those early 80s years, I had a unique experience of traveling on Malati's Sankirtan party, where we went to Denmark. Now, that wasn't our zone, and we weren't supposed to go there, but we did, as people did in those days, you know. So we were, you know, doing the, you know, going against what we were supposed to do, but it wasn't, you know, a terrible thing. We were just preaching in, you know, such a big country that certainly we could cause no harm. But it was an amazing group of ladies we were all packed in a decked out van, where this was a standard thing that there would be all books at the bottom, and then it would be covered over, and then you'd sit in the top part. And, you know, and we also had like a camper van hooked to the van. Camper van, I guess you call it, which was like a one-room temple. And so we'd stay at camping places and, you know, run out in the snow in the morning. They were pretty much empty because it was, you know, it was a cold time. And, you know, we'd come back into our little camper van, and it would be like a temple. One corner is somebody's doing cooking, another corner, you know, there's a curtain of a sari across the little area, and somebody's taking care of a little Gaurnitai in there, and then there's someone sitting giving a Bhagavatam class while somebody else is packing the Sankirtan bags and things. And it was a very, very interesting party we had. And we could say party. It was a party in some ways. We had great prasadam. Everybody there was a fantastic cook. And, you know, every day we'd all take off into different areas. Like, we all liked doing different types of Sankirtan. Malati liked the streets, and Gunamai liked to, well, she would sort of take care of everything, you know, all the devotees and Boga and everything. And I went to hospitals and schools. And that was a unique experience. I went to the schools because they had this situation where the teachers, there would be classrooms, and on the other side, the teachers had their own individual little cubbies where they would go for, I don't know, marking tests or whatever it is. And so I could go to these little cubbies, and I could knock and go in, just because I liked one-on-one. You know, we had books and we had albums, I think Michael Cassidy, or, you know, which was a nice album. I didn't mind selling it because I liked it. And it would be very interesting also in hospitals. I could meet in areas where there were just the nurses. And also I used to go to psychiatric wards, very interesting patients, and who like to talk, you know. So these experiences, you know, although Sankirtan was very difficult for me, I'm like an introvert. I don't like to go out and, you know, force my way into somebody's space. But you know, when I was able to do it by the association of these great souls who are really good at it, you had this experience of like you just enter into another reality. It's like you're working on another platform. Srila Prabhupada used to say that we're working on another platform, and that I really experienced during these times. It was difficult, but you had to get in the right frame of mind. So that, I mean, they used to call it like Sankirtan Samadhi, where you're not thinking in ordinary terms. You know, what does this person think of me? Is it all right to go in this area or whatever? You are fixed in the thought that I'm representing Krishna. I'm here to give this living entity a chance, a very rare chance to make some progress in this life. And that even a small encounter could make a huge difference of whether this person will get a human or an animal body next time. I mean, is that a fanatical way of seeing? I don't know, but that is that is the Sankirtan. That's how you can do it, because you really believe you're there to give them something substantial and to help them. And you know, you kind of just let go, and you can feel that Krishna does work through you. You know, when you look at someone, you don't size them up in the normal way, but rather the training was, you know, to address, like when you speak, you have to speak to the soul and the super soul in that body. You talk to them. You know, Krishna, please inspire this soul to come to you. You know, dear spirit soul, I'm talking to you. And then you would see how people will magically open up. Suddenly, they just trust you, you know, because we are trustworthy. And that's very rare in this world, you know, because it is sincere, and that somehow they feel it. They don't, you know, can't name it, can't explain it, but they feel it. And so many times I've had someone say, you know, I don't know why I'm telling you this. You know, I've never even told my husband or something, you know, because it's an extraordinary frame of mind, you know, it's not like an ordinary activity, you know, and also doing this, it made me appreciate the devotees so much. You know, there was one girl on our party who I wasn't that keen on. She's just really bubbly and blissful all the time, and I'm kind of the opposite. And, you know, but then being out there in the world, and you know, sometimes I'd see her in a distance and I'd just be like, I'd be so happy, you know, I'm surrounded by non-devotees in the mundane environment, and to just see her, I would be so happy. And you know, it just totally changed the way I saw her and the way I felt towards her, you know, that sometimes it's good, you know, to get away from the temple, to be out with non-devotees, and you know, so that you don't take the devotees association for granted, you know. I mean, Bhagavad Gita, it's said, it's so rare for one to even be trying for spiritual development, you know. So it's a pity when we become too familiar and we don't, but I feel like the Sankirtan experience, it really bonds people, like it bonds them for life, you know, because they really are working on a different platform, or at least trying to. And, you know, I'm very grateful, you know. And this, it makes you close, you know, doing yajna together. You don't forget those partners, even after many, many years. And, you know, periodically I had a variety of different types of Sankirtan experiences in different countries, and I just have the greatest regard for the it is the greatest gift from Krishna to be allowed to act as his representative, to touch the hearts of people and to change their destinies. And it does, like, it's one thing that I do get from, I signed up to something where I get Sankirtan news stories, you know, and you hear, like, it's so touching to hear what happens out there. And nothing could be more fulfilling, and also nothing could be more difficult. For me, it was like it's like a torture, but a beautiful learning torture that sometimes is absolutely ecstatic. So I'm very grateful and feel it's important for all devotees, everybody, you know, always to put themselves in situations where they have, you know, some kind of opportunity to go out and to meet with people and to directly talk about Krishna. And I just think it's a must for every devotee, even if it's just, you know, a one-time thing, whatever, especially anyone in a managerial position. You know, it just gives massive realization, and it's very humbling, very purifying, you know. So it's something that as the years go by, you know, like we kind of had to do it. Would I have done it on my own? Probably not. But it's a choice that people have to make now. I think it's an important choice because it's just incredible what happens when you go out as Krishna's representative, you know. Anyway, that was a fantastic Sankirtan party with wonderful people. I remember we drove back from Denmark and stopped at Radhadesh in Belgium, and took part in the installation of Radha Gopinath there, which was so beautiful, very, very beautiful. So I think I will end there.